Hey everybody, it's Natalie Bencivenga, and look who is joining me today, my good friend and colleague, Desmond Price from Independent Thought. Hey Desmond, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me back on, Natalie.
Oh my gosh, always. So Desmond, this is a slightly
Yes.
different show than normal because, we usually touch on very specific issues and target things that are impacting Americans. And yes, but this is more of a critique on a system. And I really wanted your input. And of course, the minute I read this article in The Guardian, I immediately sent it to you and I said, can we please do something around this topic? Because I'm
Yeah.
dying to hear your thoughts and I'm dying to hear everybody else's thoughts as well. So please make sure you leave some comments or just questions for us in the chat below. So this is from The Guardian. I thought this was an excellent piece from Lloyd Green. This is an analysis, and it's called Kamala Harris's new book details her steep challenges without acknowledging her failures. Whew. In 107 Days, which is the title of her book, Harris leaves little room for nuance, nor is she afflicted with a surplus of self-awareness. I mean, damn, if that's not a subtitle worth noting. So she confirmed two truths in this book, according to Lloyd. She said Joe Biden never should have sought re-election, and she did not belong on a national ticket. Yikes. Biden was snared by father time and hubris. More than half the United States rated him a failure, and she says people hated Joe Biden. What's unstated is that Harris was never a vote magnet. When she ran for Attorney General of California in 2010, she won by less than 1%, a margin of fewer than 80,000 votes in a deep blue state. Seeking the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, her bid ended in December of 2019, even before the Iowa caucus. Now we're fast forwarding to 24. Her second White House run was, of course, hardly conventional, as we know, plunged as she was into the storm with just 107 days to go. She faced steep challenges thanks to Biden and his enablers. However, he claims that timidity and indecision pocked her campaign. Fear of being overshadowed led her to pick a disheveled dad for vice president, which I totally disagree with. No one foisted the Minnesota governor onto Walz onto Harris. He became her primetime emotional support pet all the same. Whew, so much to unpack there. Before we get into her running down Walz, let's just talk a little bit about what was shared at the top of this article around the 107 days that she had to really get this campaign to a winning place. What did you make of the way that she handled her campaign and her strategy, now looking back?
It was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Because when you look at, there were certain pockets of it that it made a lot of sense and it was really kind of working for her. I mean, the first 3 weeks, if you bottled that up, it was everything you probably could have asked for. She had momentum everywhere. There were people packing arenas. People thought that a lot of that reaction was kind of like AstroTurf, but I know just from people in my own life, they were actually really inspired.
Yeah.
But I think it was a combination of, something to do with her and something to do with the fact that it was hey, anybody but Biden was kind of the energy in that moment because everyone was
Yeah.
kind of just done with him for various reasons. I know people like myself, I was done with him in 2020, but that's a whole different conversation. But the matter of the fact is that that was going really well for her. And then it felt like she pivoted hard away from what she had been doing for the first 5 or 6 weeks in September, kind of leading up to that debate. And then after that, she kind of just shuttered herself away.
Yeah.
And it made absolutely no sense. It really didn't. And so it's kind of a tale of two halves, really. It's almost like you found different ways to kind of shoot yourself in the foot. People will talk about how 107 days is not enough time to put a relevant campaign together. And I agree. With that being said, with the time that she did have, mistakes were made. And I think it's irresponsible not to address them because I think you end up trying to, I don't know, give people a pass, give her a pass for things that could have been done differently.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I also think when I was reading this piece from The Guardian, there really was this lack of self-reflection on her part. I haven't read the book yet. I don't know if I
Yeah.
will. If I do, I'll get it from the library. I won't pay for it. But shout out to our libraries. But, I think the truth of it is she did have a really big mountain to climb. Trump
Yeah.
had basically been campaigning for 4 years. I mean, that's what
Right.
he was doing the whole time. He was getting billions and billions of dollars in free press, basically, for his campaign from 2020 to 24. So we can't take that in. We can't discount that. People really couldn't stand Biden and felt like he was floundering on all fronts. And I think what was frustrating for me watching her was, you're correct, she had great momentum in the beginning. She had a lot of support. I felt like she was leaning into some fun messaging. She was leaning into things the right way. I thought it seemed to be going well, but it's almost like one of those things where once you get into your own head about something and you don't have a strong team around you that's going to clock it and say, okay, you need to pull back from this, or you need to put some energy here. I felt like part of the problem was she is such a symptom of the cancer that has infested the DNC. This
Yeah.
corporate mentality, this idea that we're still living in the Hillary Clinton era of Democrats, where there's just these old blue dogs in a way that just doesn't exist anymore. And I don't think she was ready to meet that moment, because I don't think she even knew what that moment was and how far away the culture and the reality was from what she observed and what she was experiencing from within her own sort of, feedback loop. And to me, that is a failing of the larger party itself, that it is not preparing candidates for reality. And then the people that are emerging, or the very outliers like Bernie's of the party, are constantly being told to wait their turn and take a seat. And once again, she blame shifts instead of looking within and saying, maybe we should have been listening to people about what they actually wanted us to run on in this moment, instead of what we thought they wanted based off of 30 years ago.
What would have it looked like to you as
Mm,
far as meeting the moment? Like when that phrase comes to mind, how would
yeah,
that have looked to you?
I love that question. For me, I think it should have been focused much more on working people policy in a very simplistic way. I think what MAGA, even the word, has become synonymous with the right now, but that message, make America great again, it's so vague, and it carries with it whatever you want it to mean. The Democrats
Yeah.
don't really have anything synonymous to that. I don't really think Build Back Better worked. I don't think it ever made sense as a tagline. I still don't know what that means when you say build back, but what are we building back? What's better? Like, I don't understand. It's almost like when Melania Trump used to say be best, like what? So I think for me, here's where I get frustrated, because I did not love the fact that she was basically shitting all over Governor Tim Walz. And maybe I'm biased because I did interview him, and he was so smart, and he cut through in such a way that the things he was talking about, livable wage, healthcare for all, these were things we were talking about in our conversation, housing for all. Like, why didn't they just let him run with that? Why wasn't he out there with those three things? Well, we will give you universal health care. We will raise the wage to $25 an hour. None of this $15 an hour bullshit that was 15 years ago. And we'll work on affordable housing policy. Like, those could have been things that I think would have rallied everyone
Yeah.
around them. But instead, they kind of muzzled him, and she didn't say much about anything. And when asked if she would do any of Biden's policies differently, she said no. This was in the middle of a genocide happening at the height of this energetic peak. She couldn't even acknowledge that. So I just feel like when we're talking about meeting the moment, there was no acknowledgement of what the people are talking about that
Yeah.
is bothering them, but not in this highfalutin way, but just in this sort of soup to nuts kind of way that I think actually Tim Walz was doing a really good job cutting through, and they kind of silenced him, in my opinion.
I was surprised at the fact that they were kind of allowing him to be, just a very outspoken version of himself in the first like few weeks after they announced
Mm-hmm.
him as the vice presidential pick. and then it felt like he kind of got thrown onto the shelf afterwards.
That's it.
Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. They always knew that they were behind.
Yeah.
The people who actually, were working on the inside of the campaign there, they acknowledged after the fact that given their own internal numbers, that Joe Biden was supposed to get clobbered by Donald Trump had he stayed in the race. They were projecting themselves, and your internal numbers are always going to make you look better than you actually are looking.
Yeah.
But their internal numbers were showing that Donald Trump was going to win over 400 electoral college votes had Joe Biden stayed in the race. He was going to win all the states he already did win, but he was also going to, Joe Biden was going to lose Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, Colorado, Virginia. All those states would have went red. Could you imagine if it had have all that happened on top of everything else? Like,
No.
we would be talking about the actual like death of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
So Kamala Harris essentially takes over with that like weight strapped to
Yeah.
her, the
Yeah.
weight of the Biden failures, so to speak.
Mhm.
And then she didn't really do herself a whole lot of favors,
Mm-mm.
because like you were always operating at such a deficit that in
Yeah.
order to catch Trump, to which, to be fair, she made up quite a bit of ground given where she was to
Totally.
where it ended.
Totally.
But to actually make up the rest of that ground, I felt like
Mhm.
just not enough self-reflection about where she was at comparatively to what the base was asking of her. Because when we're talking about these elections, it's never about, are you going to win over the MAGA voter, or
No.
like she was trying to do with getting Liz Cheney to do, like
That was just
speaking
weird.
events with her. It's
Mhm.
never about trying to like, yes, you want to try to flip some independents, sure. But every election is basically like, can you get people who haven't voted in the last election to come back out this time and vote for you? I'm less interested in flipping the Republican light voter and more interested in getting the people who are considering either voting for you or not voting at all. And that's the real untold story of that last election.
If you're just joining us, I'm Natalie Bencivenga, and I'm with Desmond Price of Independent Thought. And we're talking about the article from The Guardian recently around Kamala Harris's new book, sort of the lack of self-reflection around it. Desmond, I want to continue this thread to talk a little bit more about her vice president pick, to your point. And I wanted to add this too, that it's kind of a weird thing to blame your vice presidential pick on your failure, because I think over the course of history, it's been shown that while, yes, they do impact the vibes of your campaign, they're really not consequential at the end of the day in terms of whether people come out or not. But this article goes on to say she unloads on Walz in the book, lacerating him for his poor debate, accusing him of falling into a trap, lulling Walz into irrelevance. She also said that Walz was not the pick of Harris's dream. The honor goes to Pete Buttigieg, a former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, population 103,000, a fraction of the size of a congressional district. He quit the 2020 race months after Harris. Harris felt that she couldn't pick him because he was a gay man. She was a woman of color. Harris's campaign memoir may be many things, profiles and courage. It is not. Ouch. I thought that was interesting that she wanted Pete Buttigieg, who I will say since Trump's election he has come out, been very vocal against this administration, has said a lot of things. But what do you make of her having him as her first pick? And do you think she would have fared any better than having Governor Walz on the ticket? Or do you also think it might not have been of any consequence?
I mean, at the end of the day, it really just depends on what would have been done differently, because
Right.
it
Right.
was working in the beginning
Yes.
to allow Governor Walz to be as present as he was. And then it felt like before his debate even happened at the end of September, they had already like shelved him for weeks at a time. So the question is, would you have allowed Pete Buttigieg to be out and be all over the place, or would you have shelved him too? So, I mean, it feels like Kamala Harris understands that she created a bunch of really positive name recognition for herself through the being the vice president and then being the nominee in 2024. And she's already considering whether she's going to run again in 2028, which I think all signs point to yes. And
Mm-hmm.
so, with that being said, this feels more like damage control than anything. It's classic spin on like, hey, none of that stuff is actually my fault, which I find to be laughable because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that didn't really work out so well for Hillary Clinton.
It certainly did not. And I'm a big fan of a redemption arc personally. I like it
Yeah,
when somebody can grow and can own, not a flip flopper as the right has tried to put this idea of evolution of the human condition, but somebody that can say, you know what, had I had that opportunity to do it again, and she had this book she was writing, she could have really reflected on things. And instead, she says about trans rights here, she says, I wish I could have gotten the message across that there isn't a distinction between they, them, and you. The pronoun that matters is we, Harris says. Like, to me, it's like, this is such low-hanging fruit, Desmond. like, I don't understand, why we can't just acknowledge some of the things that we could do better. And acknowledging people's full humanity is a pretty simple one, but to that end, I think we have to talk a little bit about how the genocide in Gaza really did impact her campaign negatively, because I believe of the way that she handled speaking to people who were speaking out against what the Israeli government was doing. And it was at
right.
such a fervid pitch at that moment. There's a lot of debate whether it really, at the end of the day, mattered from an election perspective. Forward, which is an independent nonprofit newspaper, says Gaza didn't cost Harris the election, but her approach pointed to a broader problem. Pro-Palestinian organizers said the problem was her focus on courting moderates, including Republicans, rather than motivating the party's left flank. And that really speaks to what you just said. Instead of crossing the aisle, she should have been focusing her attention on pulling more people from the left to her. What do you make of that?
When's the last time you ever saw a Republican trying to appeal to Democratic voters?
Say it, Desmond. I know.
Have
This is
you
not
ever
a thing they do.
have you ever seen it in your life? No, they go further to the right.
That's right.
Every time.
That's
Every
it.
time. Like they appeal to their own people, the end. Either you're with us or you're the enemy. That's how they treat everything.
Yeah.
You know? And so it always boggles my mind that the Democrats be like, we have to appeal to the center. We have to appeal to the right. You've never heard Republicans ever say we have to appeal to the center. They don't do it. They don't do it. They don't do it. They're like, no, 6-week abortion bans. Let's go.
Yeah.
So
that's generous.
Yeah. So they don't care. To the extent that it affected the election, there's no way to know. Right. Because we are talking about people who either chose to vote or chose not to vote. You can't really measure that. I will say that she lost by 5 points or less in all 7 of the swing states. So there is a very strong possibility that it had a huge impact, especially in Michigan, where you have the largest concentration of, Arab Americans living in southern Michigan, who there was actually, I forget the exact statistic here, but in the county that Dearborn is in Michigan, I believe Rashida Tlaib is also the congresswoman who represents that district. She won that district, and Trump also won that district. So the same people who voted for her, they also either didn't vote for Harris or they voted for Trump. That says a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't tell me that these two people are ideologically similar. They're not. So this is people voting on that issue. And I don't know. It still boggles my mind to make the decision that she made. But I've never really thought of Kamala Harris as a great politician. I started independent thought in the 2020 Democratic primary. As you mentioned at the top, she dropped out before Iowa. When Joe Biden won the nomination, he pledged that he was going to nominate a black woman to be vice president. I always thought that the smartest pick in that scenario would have been Stacey Abrams. I don't know why he didn't go that route. But Kamala Harris has never really been a very astute politician, So I really hope that we do see some newer faces next time around.
So you don't think call her daddy doing that interview? You don't think that was the right call, or do you think it was the right call? Because I thought that was also interesting too, that she was trying to move into different media spaces at the very end. I don't know.
Yes. No, I do think it's a good idea. The problem
Mm-hmm.
is that like she didn't identify that soon enough.
Yeah.
And this is a time where, like the timing plays against you. Because
Yeah.
had you been doing those things for months, if not like a year, then yeah. Or at the
Sure.
very least, maybe just start at the beginning of your campaign. I think when you're thrust into it, you're told, hey, you have 107 days, go. I mean, you're not going to make every decision correctly, but I
Totally.
think going on that podcast was a good thing. I think she missed an opportunity to go on Joe Rogan. I think she should have done it.
I know you and I talked about that, I think,
Yeah.
offline too, our thoughts on what she should have or should not have done. I will say this, having said all of that, I do
Yeah.
applaud the fact that it ended up being as close in some ways as it did
It really
because,
was. It really
yeah,
was.
because of her lack of time to prepare. I can understand why people would say, oh, she could or should run again. Now, whether that would be a smart choice to put her up as the, Democratic nominee is another question, especially when we have a new crop, a new generation of thought leaders and Congress people, senators, et cetera, who are trying to make their own mark that I think could be very interesting. Axios is saying there's this article that just came out from them where it's AOC's 2028 decision, run for president or Senate. For people that may not know, I'm speaking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is from New York, a Democrat and a representative, and her team are positioning her to run for either president or the United States Senate in 28. This is important because this could shake up the presidential race or Senate leadership. In some ways, I think the Senate would be more consequential. A fellow New Yorker, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, is up for re-election. He is 74 in 2028. This could become a generational clash, pitting the Democratic Party's leading traditionalist against what they're calling the star insurgent progressive. I find this fascinating, Desmond, for so many reasons. And I do want to talk about the Senate thing, but I just want to mention when it comes to the presidency, there's a lot of people out there right now that are saying, no way in hell, we cannot run a woman. We've had 2 women lose. And I think that's kind of sexist and short-sighted, and I don't agree with it. But I'm curious, because you happen to get into the statistics of the number crunching much more than I do when it comes to the elections. What are your thoughts on the viability of AOC as a presidential candidate in 2028?
She can 100% win. There's no doubt in my mind.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, without getting like too into the weeds,
Sure.
I think the briefest overview I could give is that when you go back and look at the last 2 elections, the details matter a lot here.
Yeah.
People, I think too often with politics, we try to like create these really like simplistic reasonings for why things either work or they don't work. But the fact of the matter is that like Hillary Clinton barely lost that election.
Yeah.
I mean, and I mean the slimmest of margins. 40,000 votes in Pennsylvania, 20,000 in Wisconsin, 10 or 11,000 in Michigan. Those 3 things flip, and Hillary Clinton would have been the president in 2016. I mean, we are talking about so many different people in Pennsylvania who didn't even think that Donald Trump could win, so they didn't bother to vote. She never went campaigned in Wisconsin until like the very like last like week or so, which people kept urging her to go out there, including her own staff, and she just thought that it was a lock. It was like the blue wall. Like, I don't need to go to Wisconsin. What do I need to go out there for?
Right.
And then in Michigan, you had over 80,000 ballots that left the top line blank. They just didn't vote for either Trump or Clinton. So the amount of and people and I don't want to downplay the fact of of misogyny playing a role here, because it always does.
Yeah.
With that being said, any woman will have to deal with that no matter what. Every woman from here on out will have to deal with that. With that being said, I don't want to also make it seem as though that was the only thing keeping her from victory. It was
100%.
not. I think there was a lot of mistakes made on that campaign, including pretending as if nothing was wrong when Trump was willing to say, yeah, something's wrong. We all know from many years later how much of a con artist he is, but at least he was willing to say what everyone was feeling, is that like, hey, everything is not okay. Fast forward to 2024, Kamala Harris is running the exact same kind of a playbook, being like, hey, everything's great. In fact, I'm going to do nothing differently than what Joe Biden has done the last few years. And everyone was upset with the Biden administration, and they wanted things to change. And so, and again, you look at the numbers here from the last election, She loses all 7 swing states, but each one of them was 5 points or less. These were all real small margins of victory. Michigan, again, 80,000 votes. I just, when I look at each individual state, it is obvious to me that given a little bit more time and a little different messaging, that she could have closed those gaps completely. And she was operating from a massive deficit. I say all of that to say this. You cannot look at these elections and say that misogyny and misogynoir did not play a role. They did, and they always will going forward. But the candidates made so many mistakes in their messaging that I feel like that is the true difference between winning and losing. Because when you're a woman running for president, you have more working against you than a man would. So in my mind, you can't also then shoot yourself in the foot along the way with your own self-imposed mistakes.
Amen to that. Do you think when we're looking at the future of the Democratic Party, you know, we're seeing what's going on with Zohran Mamdani with his campaign and Trump threatening to withhold federal dollars if he were to win in New York, which I don't know how that's not a thing that we should all be talking about, because that's basically like interference from our president in our free elections, apparently. God, if any one of these things was happening at any other moment, it would just dominate headlines. But because of the level of hell we're in, it's like flip and it just moves on. And I just want to take a pause to acknowledge the insanity of that. But when we're looking at Mamdani's campaign for mayor of New York City, do you think he has a good chance of beating Cuomo in this moment? And if he does win, what does that signal to other Democratic areas around the country?
Unless some giant scandal or some kind of just, I can't imagine what the Democratic establishment or the donor class would have to do to blunt Zohran Mamdani's momentum from winning. I mean, because unlike other politicians who just kind of rely on the fact that they're really popular, this guy's ground game is insane. He has tens of thousands of people knocking doors every day in that city. This is somebody who has had their foot on the gas and keeps putting it more on the gas. I have a hard time believing he's not going to win this thing. And it's also, the fact of the matter is he might lose if they were running someone competent against him, but they're running Andrew Cuomo.
I know.
We're talking about one of the least popular politicians in America.
That's right.
So I cannot think of the perfect storm that would actually prevent Zohran from getting into office. But I apologize. What was your second part of that question?
No, I think you answered it. I mean, we're talking about meeting the moment around his campaign. So I think that was a fine assessment. I would like to circle back as we wrap this up, though, because I did want to touch on the generational clash. And it sort of speaks to between Cuomo and Mamdani as well. But going back to AOC and Schumer, what would that look like if she does decide to challenge him in the Senate as he's up for his bid? And he's already, 74? She's 35. I mean, my God, just the generational difference in experiences and once again, meeting the moment, understanding what working people are dealing with right now. What do you see that looking like?
If she challenged Schumer, it would be the ultimate test of, is the Democratic Party going to shift more towards democratic socialism across the board?
Correct.
Because if she were to win that race, it would open the floodgates for challenges all over the place to establishment Democrats.
Yeah.
And I think they're definitely afraid of that. So they would make this entire race about her radical policies. And I frankly find that to be welcoming, because I would love that, because I think enough of us have been through this long enough that we are tired of the framing of raising the wage being a radical policy, of healthcare for all being a radical policy, of cleaning the environment being a radical policy, of, trans people are people and deserve protection underneath the law to be a radical policy. So we are constantly being told that the things that we advocate for are radical, but when you actually say them out loud, I'm waiting for someone to tell me how they're radical. And so, but the mainstream media machine is what it is, and they are going to keep saying words over and over and over again until people just get that stuck in their head. When I talk to people in my DMs, Like they're like, oh, I don't think AOC can win because she might be too radical. And I'm just like, that's how you know the propaganda is
I
working.
know.
You
I
know, and
know.
so I feel emboldened in the idea of us having these platforms, Natalie, because I think we need to take the time to specifically state why that
Yes.
propaganda is nonsense, because there is nothing radical about these positions that we are taking.
Absolutely. And I'd also like to clarify what the word really means, radical. There were a lot of feminist philosophers, Black revolutionaries in the 70s and 80s that talked about radical just means to grab from the root and pull. And I always loved that way of looking at the word radical, because when we're talking about healthcare, for example, Obamacare is a Band-Aid. It is not radical. What would be radical would be to uproot the system that is not
Mm-hmm.
serving us. And I love, and in that place would be healthcare for all, which
Yeah.
is not a scary concept. We all deserve healthcare. So when you're talking about what it is to be radical, I love thinking about it just means getting to the root of a problem. And that is really what a lot of the democratic socialists want, is to deal with the root of these issues, including climate change, gun violence, healthcare, racial injustice, gender injustice. These are things that are systemic and deep rooted in this country that need to be dealt with. And I am tired personally of kicking this can down the road. I look back at my own life, and I'm in my early 40s now, and I was so naive, Desmond. I just thought so many of these things will be fixed by now, and none of them are. And I'm watching television from like 30, 40 years ago with my husband. We've been watching the Golden Girls, and the issues that they're talking about on that show haven't changed a bit, including Israel and Gaza. They were discussing it on the Golden Girls. That show is 40 years old. We cannot kick these cans down the road. We are at the cliff. It's time for change. So I think it's exciting that we have so many people that are engaged with our system. And I'm excited to be a journalist in this moment and get to collaborate with fellow journalists like yourself, so we can talk about this issue and also provide not only context, but media literacy. Because at the end of the day, yes, of course, we love for you to agree with us, but really the more important thing is we want you to feel educated and informed, so you can at least make a decision about an issue that is rooted in reality and not these fallacies that are swirling all around us due to the disinformation and propaganda machines. So that's my little spiel on that. Any other thoughts before we wrap this up?
I would just like that in the future, when you hear people talking about policies that are radical, you just flip it back on its face. You know, tell them that not having an assault weapons ban is radical, and that keeping the federal minimum wage at $7.25 is radical, and that
Mm-hmm.
continuing to pollute our skies every day is radical, and
Mm-hmm.
that continuing to give more and more money to billionaires is radical.
Yeah.
We are living in the radical, and we are
Thank
trying
you.
to actually simplify things and make things more common sense again.
Listen, they should just hire us to do the messaging, because I think we just figured it out right there.
I I am actually going deeper into my own conspiracy here that the Democrats do not actually want to be popular. I'm, you know,
Mm.
as time goes on, I am becoming more and more convinced of it.
Well, I mean, look, follow the money, and I guess we'll find out who's
I
deciding what at the end of the day.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. Like, I really want to be on team. Like, oh, they just need to do this, this, and this. But you know, the more we have these conversations, the more it feels to me. I'm just like, they can't be this
Yeah.
stupid. They actually cannot be. I'm starting to
Mm-hmm.
refuse to believe it. I'm like, you have to understand
Yeah.
that you are not doing the correct thing, which leads me to believe that it's intentional. It
Mm.
has to be. It has to be intentional. I'm just anyway. I'll say that rant for another day.
That's okay. We'll have plenty of time for rants in the future, for sure.
Yeah.
For everybody that continued to join us throughout, we had quite a growing little community watching us here. Thank you
Yes.
so much. Once again, I'm Natalie Bencivenga. This is Desmond Price of Independent Thought. You can follow us both or subscribe to our Substacks above here. And as always, everyone, please take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Desmond.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.